So today's workshop is measuring success through metrics, and we're going to define that, understand a lot more what that means. Before we start and before I introduce our guest speakers, a couple ground rules. One is go ahead and put yourself on mute. If you're not on mute, put yourself on mute. At any time there are questions that you have, use the chat, and I will be monitoring the chat. So if I see questions that are really good, or our wonderful guest speaker sees something that's really good, she'll call it out and she'll be like, hey, I want to answer this question. Like, all right, we're going to do that. So chat window is there for you all to ask questions, remark, comment, if something stands out to you. Use it as a way to build community as well. So that's one. If you haven't muted yet, make sure you're mute. If not, I will start asking our wonderful tech folks, Civic Leadership Academy, who is doing a lot of technology in the background. So Wen's going to take care of the technology piece. Ching's also in the background as well, who's going to be answering any questions. Do you have any close questions? I think I covered the most part. Ground rules, chat. Oh, and last piece, we'll do it later on too. If you're our mini grant winners and you are presenting today, what helps us out a lot is that you have your name and then you have your org or your project name next to you. That will help us out for part 2. Okay. If you don't know what I was talking about, 1, you probably need to read the email, or 2, you're not a mini grant winner. In that case, don't worry. With that said, I get to do this wonderful introduction really quick. If you're talking about, yeah, this is not gonna be on YouTube, badass of the badass of people when it comes to fundraising, telling your story, right, and consulting, so that way you grow the organization, you grow your purpose and mission. I cannot imagine anyone else who's better than this for this space. Not only that, her and I have been friends for a very long time, right? And we talk a lot about like how to make the community better, especially coming from our Asian American identities and knowing that, you know, we grew up Asians, like sometimes we're taught to be quiet, to be a little bit more like watch out, kind of like, you know, to be on the safe side. And we realize that has hurt us a lot. And so from there, we talk a lot more about like, you know, how do we make impacts, powerful impact, inspire the youth? How do we empower the next generation so that our world can be better? So it's just really exciting to have this conversation with my dear friend Anne today, and she'll talk a little bit more about herself in a second. But Anne is here to talk about what is metrics, how do you use metrics to tell your stories, your successes, how does it help you to actually grow? With that said, welcome, Anne.
I always despise these introductions because it sets you up and you're just sitting here going, oh my gosh, I have to live up to a huge expectation now because the host just put me on a pedestal. But thank you, everyone. And thank you, Anthony, for asking me to come and join you. So a little bit about myself. My name is An Nguyen, and I hail from San Jose, California. This is where I was born and raised. And I work for CCS Fundraising. I'm a vice president there. Actually, I just got up to senior vice president, which is really crazy this last summer. So Anthony, talking about like, you know, really advocating for yourself and aspiring to, you know, take on leadership roles. I'm just really proud to, at this point, be a senior vice president at CCS. I've been doing fundraising for about 15 years now. So right out of college, I entered this field not knowing anything about it. And at this point, you know, I'm 15 years in, I'm a senior vice president at a firm that really specializes in supporting nonprofits in big vision. And so I've done campaigns that are anywhere from $100 million all the way to a $2 million campaign. I've worked with campaigns that focused in on building a building, and I focused in on campaigns that were talking about endowments and programming. And I've worked with a lot of different types of nonprofits. So I worked with feeding banks. I've worked with religious organizations. I'm currently working on a park project in San Francisco. And so our firm really specializes in managing campaigns. So above all, I am a project manager, managing campaigns. We also help with strategic fundraising planning. And so if an organization is trying to figure out how do we make sure that our shop works optimally, we oftentimes come in and do an assessment, and we'll do a sweep to figure out, you know, what are you doing with your data, your information gathering? What are you doing with your staff? Is your staff big enough? How is your staff spending their time, and how are they being managed to really make sure that they are working and doing fundraising as effectively as possible? And so I'm just really proud to be a part of a company that focuses in on mission, helping nonprofits really maximize the work that they do. So that's a little bit about me.
Wonderful. You know, for some reason, I knew you were VP. I did not know you were senior VP, and this past summer you got promoted. That's amazing.
Yeah, it all goes into effect in September. So you guys got like a little sneak peek. That's the first time I
Oh,
actually,
okay, that makes sense. I was like,
that's the first time I said it out loud. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm an SVP. Oh. So yeah.
okay. Oh, and by the way, yeah, you're gonna hear me through all these different intersections, right? So men, I kind of attacked you all, right? I'm pretty sure you're gonna be growing healthy. Women, if you need a badass, strong role model, Anna here is like the person to be.
You're being too kind. And I just want to reflect back really quick. And I'm sorry, guys, I have kids in the background. I got my husband, I got 2 dogs. If you hear background noise, that's just life. It happens. But I just want to reflect really back on what Anthony said early on in this discussion, which is the role that we have in our society, right? And I think especially in these past several years and seeing the uptick in hate crimes against Asian Americans. And, all of us, I think many of us are feeling this fear and this worry about like, what is our role here in the United States? And so I just want to commend each and every one of you. I can't see your face because a lot of you guys are off camera. It's okay. It's a Saturday morning. You guys should be, just taking it easy, but just commending each and every one of you for stepping into this space and owning some of it and taking a place and saying, you know what, we can contribute to making our community better. And we can contribute to giving a face and giving a voice to our community. Because growing up, my parents always said, don't rock the boat. Don't rock the boat. We're immigrants. We got here and we made it and we have a home. Just get a good paying job and like survive. But I push back and I say, why can't we thrive? As cliche as that is, why can't we thrive? And so I think that's where I'm so happy to be in this space with you and to be one of Anthony's good friends that he always taps on to be part of this work, because it's work. And the more that we can collaborate and talk and learn from one another, the stronger we can be, and the more we can really accurately represent the diversity and the nuances that it is to be Asian American, because we are not a monolith. We are very different. We are unique individuals, and we are not just here to know mathematics and be lawyers and doctors. There's so much more to us.
Wow, I didn't realize I signed up for a motivational speaking engagement too. That's amazing. Thank you. So by the way, if you're vibing with any of this and you're really appreciating this, right, do a +1, do a heart. One, obviously to know you're not a robot, but 2, it's like, it shows our appreciation for our speaker. Now, I want to make sure, because we have a short amount of time, we're going to just jump right in. And so I'm going to ask a series of questions. You're welcome to, folks, if those in the audience, you're welcome to ask questions too, if things that you think would be really helpful to you, for you to ask. I'm a big believer this is like, there's no such, like, half thoughts are okay, half questions are okay. We have the ability to like form questions together and to help you understand where your challenges. And if you think about it this way, to get someone like Anne as even a consultant for you, right, would just mean time and money. She's here to volunteer her time. And I say, if you want to take space, ask those questions. Now, with that said, I'm going to just jump right in, because I want to make sure we deliver as much as possible. And is that okay? Okay. So the workshop today is measuring success through metrics. And I gotta be honest, I probably picked this up because I was working in tech for a while. I was working at PayPal, Google, eBay for a little bit, right? And they're always talking about metrics this, metrics that, right? And so why are metrics so important?
Absolutely. And of course, the moment you ask me a question, my son is screaming in the background. So I apologize if you can hear him. But metrics, it can sound very intimidating, right? Especially for someone who is hearing it for the first time and hearing it from a lot of different sources. And so really metrics, if you bring it down to its ground level, is how do you measure your work? How do you measure what you are doing? That's what it boils down to, right? And so in our nonprofit, in our civic engagement work, there's a question of, okay, when you look at what you have set out to do, when you envision, you saw a problem and you wanted to create a solution, and then you went about doing to act out on that solution and to hopefully, actually make an impact. How do you measure each of those different steps, right? And so I think the hard part about this is stepping back, right? And really doing a due diligence around those questions. So when you look at the, why does your work exist? Why does your organization, if you start an organization, why did you start it? Why does it exist? Really, that North Star you always hear about, right? Like, what is that story behind? I saw something or I experienced something and I knew I wanted to make a difference. Okay, so there's the why. What is it that you wanted to create to then address that issue that you saw? Or what is the challenge that you're seeing right now? How are you trying to create solutions, right? And then there's also the question of geography, right? Like we can't hit everything all around the globe, but we sure can hit something within the district that we're in, or perhaps the blocks that we're in. I'm just doing work for the little neighborhood behind me. And then there's also the when, right? And that's kind of the crucial link to all these pieces, right? So when you're measuring each of those questions, or you're trying to evaluate each of those questions, then you got to think about the sequencing, right? So one thing I will say about the measuring tool, or however you want to measure, is the consistency, right? So, and then that's a really important role in when you're looking at the why, what, how, where, and you start measuring, is you got to be able to compare apples to apples. And so if you start measuring something now, you start counting something now, and then 3 months from now, you change it up and you're like, no, we're actually going to measure in this way. And then a year later, you look back and you're like, how do we compare these two numbers? Because we're actually counting different things. And we can't really tell a story about whether our work has grown, our work stayed the same, our work has gone down, because your actual counting and the rubric for which you're counting is really off. And so I'm kind of jumping into different points, but really, like when Anthony said, what is metrics? It is counting all these different pieces of the work that you do.
Can you give me an example of like what you mean by counting and what you do? Because I feel like if I were, like, for example, one of the things that CLA we're doing, right, is that we are giving out grants to the students. And then we want to do a showcase for those who did the grants, but also other groups. I feel like I'd be like, well, isn't number the great thing? Like, just have more of those. Are you talking about something more specific that would be useful?
So I think what it starts off with is you can't measure the impact you have. You can't assess who you are today. And you can't plan it for the future unless you're able to really assess the type of impact you want to make, right? So for example, if you think about breadth, so there's, yes, you could say more the better, right? Like the more money you can get and the more $5,000 grants or $1,000 grants we can give out, the better. But that's one measurement tool, right? There's also depth. And so we could forever give out $1,000 grants, and we can forever keep it to, let's say, I'm just throwing out numbers, 20 grants a year. And then those awardees tell us what they did. Great, let's move forward from there. But what if, like, after a couple of years, you tracked and you said, okay, so we gave $1,000 grants, we gave them to 20 recipients, they showed us what they did, but then what? Right? But then what else do we want them to accomplish? Or what else do we want to provide to them so that we can deepen their ability to do the work they want to do? So that goes all the way back again to your why, right? It's like, what is your mission? If your mission is, I am here to grow Asian leadership, starting from when they are young, so that they are mentored and they have the tools and the resources to act out on that leadership ability and vision, great. Now, not only do we maybe need to give them resources to launch or to keep their work going, but it's also, how do we deepen their ability to do that work? Is it we need to give them larger grants? Is it do we need to really narrow down our focus on, who gets those grants so that we can expand upon the amount each one gets, right? Do we really narrow down what type of leadership work we want them to do? Those type of assessments can't happen unless you really track, right? How many are getting it? How many are doing the work? How are they doing their work moving forward? And then kind of like tracking later on, what's the result of all of that those things that we just did, right? And so it's those measurements. And the thing is, that's how you build your story for your funders, right? It's not just, we gave 20 grants this year for $1,000 and they gave us a presentation and it was fantastic and we feel so good. Funders are going to say, that's great. What's your vision for the future? Like, what do you want to do next? Or how are you going to quantify what's next? And if I just go back really quick to where, right? And slow me down at any moment, because I can just keep on like rolling with this. But talking about, oh man, did I just lose my train of thought? The where. Okay, take me on. Okay, keep on going, because I just lost my train of thought, but it'll come back to me.
We'll come back to it. So this
Yeah.
sounds, this is exciting because now, like, and we use UCLA as an example, because like our students have a lot of wonderful projects. One of the projects we were working on, like we did last week, the last session was really making changes and reforms in redistricting so that in the future, we have more diversity, right? And this is located in San Diego, right? So it's amazing. And we were talking about this in the conversation, right? And you were like, there's so much information coming in. And so this actually came up a little bit because we were talking about this, right? Because it's cool to know the why and the purpose. I feel like that was a great group that knew their why, right? Some diversity, right? And the quality of diversity to be inclusive. I like, love it. But how, if you're starting off brand new, right? Because like now I'm thinking like, you have so much information coming in, you're trying to figure out data. What information do we need to prioritize and why would you say so? Yeah, and like, what does the information do? Like, why does it help us track?
Okay, you just brought it back up. Thank you. So what do you mean where? All right. First off, I think it's so admirable that, people want to come together and they want to start a new nonprofit. They want to start a new effort. I encourage you and everyone who wants to kind of get into some type of civic duty or like some type of work that impacts people to do a bit of research around what's going on around you, right? Because I think a lot of times there may be a little bit of overlap or a little bit of repetition of what's happening, which is not bad. But sometimes when you're able to do a little bit of research to figure out, okay, so in this effort I'm trying to do, in this purpose I'm trying to drive, are there other groups that are already doing it in the same place that I'm doing it with the same purpose, with the same everything? Because just taking it back to thinking of funders, right? They're being asked by so many organizations, and many times they may see that overlap and they don't know how to distinguish you from another organization that may be doing the exact same thing, the exact same area. And so many times, a lot at the beginning, it's about figuring out if you are being redundant, if what you're doing is already happening, and you may be stronger collaborating with the organization or the people that are already doing the work and like, adding more people to the volunteer network. Or if, from your research, this isn't happening right now, the niche that I'm looking to make a difference is not being served by any other group. And so that's one point of data, right? One point of metrics that you can kind of raise up as you're building out your story is, we've done our research. These are the sources. This is what we found out. Then moving on from there, you start thinking about, okay, so I want to feed, I'm just throwing out ideas. I want to feed the homeless people that exist around my neighborhood, right? I don't see anyone else doing that. So when we're thinking about, that's kind of like our niche, we're going to feed these people that are homeless. How are we going to do that work, right? And so just going very basic, we want to feed them. We want to feed them on these days, and we want to feed them this many meals. And so you start tracking that, right? It's how much are you doing? How many people are you impacting, right? It's really, really basic level. One other measurement that sometimes you don't think about adding in is how many people are doing the work. Because I'll tell you, funders, foundations, what I'm hearing more and more is they are really focused on activation. So the work that you're doing, volunteerism, how many people are you mobilizing to do that work? And stewardship, how are you sustaining the work that you're doing, right? And so those measurements mean this. Activation, again, like how much are you actually able to output? How much are you able to do in the timeline that you're working? And then volunteerism, how many people are you bringing together, how many partners even, right? And that goes back to the doing your research to find out if there's other organizations doing this work that you are then scaling, that you have realized, you know what, we can add on and not be redundant, right? And nonprofits, I mean, funders love that. So an example of that is a food bank. Food banks are focused on what, Anthony?
Gathering food, lots of food, and having members of the community who are in food scarcity places come and pick up food so they're taken care of.
Bingo, right? For the most part, that's really what they do. But when they thought deeper about why do people need free food? It's because they are facing financial insecurity. And when you think about financial insecurity, there's a lot of different things that they're facing, right? Between they need perhaps psychiatric help, perhaps they need homes or shelter, perhaps they need social services, perhaps they need financial support, and also perhaps they need healthcare too. There's all these different things that they could possibly need, but we're a food bank. We are not specialists in all those different arenas. And so what you see with a lot of food banks nowadays is they're creating wraparound services where food banks normally have a facility, right? A really, really well put together facility and warehouse. And so they have the place to provide the services, but they shouldn't be the ones that provide everything wraparound. But if they're bringing people in that need all these different services, why can't they partner? Why can't they bring in some volunteer dentists? Why can't they bring in some social services from the government? Why can't they bring in, financial literacy people, et cetera, et cetera? And so this idea of collaborating, right? Acknowledging that I saw a problem. I have the ability to address one area of this challenge, but there's these other nonprofits that are also kind of triaging, right? To help this person or these individuals, this community, uplift them per se. Then how can we collaborate? That type of narrative is so powerful for funders. And then the last was stewardship, which is sustainability, right? Like you have this vision that's really, really aspirational and you've gotten off the ground and you started doing some of this work. How are you going to plan ahead and how are you planning to be able to accomplish that from a resourcing standpoint, from a personnel standpoint, from volunteerism standpoint, and from the actual accomplishment of those numbers that you see looking ahead?
Interesting. So first thought was like, I love this because it's because when you mentioned food bank, I'm thinking, okay, I mean, food banks exist almost every large cities, right? Popular area. One of our groups today, who's doing their group consulting, is focusing on providing resources and care because of COVID-19. And I see this sometimes like, oh, these projects shows up because, in dire disasters, catastrophic things happening. So the first part, right, is like, you talk about partnership and what I'm hearing is, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not too sure of this term, wraparound services means the different services around those things that might cause it. So COVID-19, the pandemic, was not the cause of let's say, for example, the drop in mental health care, drop in finances, but it exasperated the system, right? And so wraparound services, the partnership would be, like having counselors, social services come in, financial literacy to support so that in this disastrous time, people are taken care of, and then also creating a foundation for forward, right? So that's what you mean by wraparound service?
Yes, yes. And so what I understand is there are some folks on this call who are doing more of lobbying per se, right? Like they want to educate their community around certain legislation that's really important, or they want to get people to vote because voting is so crucial. They're not there to influence people to vote, but maybe get them to register to vote and be educated about voting, right? We have to think there's a lot of different organizations that are already doing that work, right? And so it's not about you not doing it. That's really, really exciting. And you should be engaged and you bring a unique perspective to the work because, again, of our demographic, because of our knowledge of our own respective communities, because of the neighborhoods we live in. But the question is, who is already doing a lot of that legwork, so that perhaps even it alleviates your demand to do some of those basic things, right? And it frees you up to do more of the active work. And perhaps that other team has like a really good plan that you're like, okay, so I don't have to start from scratch. I can leverage that and we can team up and do this work.
Oh, I love this. And by teaming up, because coming from a place of like our own authentic experience, right? Our demographics, having those knowledge and insights, that would also set us apart from just a regular project that shows up. And that would makes our story even more impactful because we have clarity and specificity, I guess the word. I think
Specificity, yeah, totally.
I thought I made that word up. Guess I
Nope.
didn't.
Totally a word. Yeah. Hard to say, but totally a word. I hear you.
Okay. Well, that's exciting. So this is really cool because now I'm thinking, so one of the projects that we have consulting is really focusing on, like I mentioned earlier, right? Like doing like social services, whether it's like building community together, finding pathways to share resources. So there's a very big human connection, and they could even stand out even more by partnering up with maybe wraparound services, and funders and grantors and sponsors can look at this and like, oh my goodness, you're just not one time like one trick pony. You're really committed and you're building partnership to make things better.
Totally. Totally. And there's so many people in the nonprofit realm that are super talented and have decades of experience. And so these partnerships, one, they absolutely strengthen your narrative and your ability to create impact. But there's also like a learning opportunity here too, right? Like, I don't know everything, but if I was able, the work that I do, I'm able to step into nonprofits where, again, I'm working with a CEO or with a CFO or director of philanthropy who's been in this field for decades. And I'm learning so much from them as I'm project managing. And so for this group in particular, because we're talking about a lot of youth and young adults who are kind of entering into this realm, I think when you're able to connect with a more established organization, it's a learning opportunity for you too.
Gotcha.
Sorry, we're going to many different themes right now beyond metrics.
Yeah. Well, I mean, metrics is part of growth, I feel like, right? And grow, right? I mean, I think I see usually two routes. One is very capitalistic industrial, this trick that tells us that pull ourselves up by the bootstrap. Like, I'm a one person success story. I'm a self-made man. But I haven't seen that really working out if they want to really make impact, right? And
Yeah.
let me know if that's true, because I don't think the big most impactful projects stay as a small group. They really partner.
It's so funny that you mentioned that, Anthony, because that's a theme that I was thinking, I've been reflecting on. I think a lot of times we gravitate towards people who are founders. We gravitate towards people who are, the one person, not just man or woman, who like founded this effort and built it up all by themselves, right? When reality, I think we're so much more effective if we really focus back on the mission of what we're trying to do. It's never just like one organization that comes in and takes over. It's much more impactful when you see a community coming together and mobilizing and galvanizing around a bigger issue, and each one doing their part to contribute towards, again, that like more big picture thinking.
Okay.
Coalition building. Hey, Liana, pulling out those big words. Yes, coalition building.
Oh, I love this. Okay, so I guess, and I want to make sure I get that on the same page, because sometimes maybe it's my own ego where like I want to do everything by myself. I think it's a little fear of like showing up for like and showing what I got, because I don't want to be judged. But it sounds like I probably should get over that, because if I really want to make an impact, it's either stay with my ego or get out of it and focus on like, yeah.
Oh, not only ego, it's just easier. It's easier to make unilateral decisions all the time, right? It's like, I don't got to tell anyone. I don't have to get feedback. I don't have to get input. Like, I have my team of 5 people and we're like, we made a decision. We're going to rock and roll. When's laughing? It's true, right? But at the end of the day, what's more impactful in the long run is if you go through those hard discussions around what is our unified big picture pie in the sky. How are we going to collaborate so that we're not stepping on each other and making this move forward? And bringing it back to metrics, how are we all going to measure this? Because I'll tell you right now, right? Everyone might be measuring in a different way and have different definitions for the metrics that you've all agreed upon. And when you come together to start talking about how you're going to, paint this picture, you realize that your data is flawed. And so that goes with the coalition, and it goes within a small, even organization, right? So we're going back to this idea of, look, sit down with your team, whether each of you decide to go the coalition route, or you decide like, you know what, there's really no one doing this, or we have a very like specific area we want to make impact in. We have 6 people, we're going to recruit more people, and we're going to like move forward with this work. You need to sit down with your team members who are helping you to track the information and make sure that you have a very clear definition of each of those measurements. Like, what is this measurement that we're collecting? Why are we collecting this measurement? And then what are the definitions around that measurement? It could be very simple, or it could be other things that are a bit more elaborate, right? Because here's the thing. Warning, data tracking is not fun. Not fun. That's the least glorious part, or least glamorous part of this job, right? It's like, you're like, I just want to go out there and I want to give people food, and I want to have these story with them and like just learn from these incredible human beings. Yeah, well, you still need to figure out, okay, maybe perhaps what's this person's name? If you want to track, what is their ethnicity? Because a lot of funders are thinking about, are you serving BIPOC, right? Okay, what is their age range? Okay, where is the area that you made that service? Okay, and then what day or time did you make this service? And then who's the person that delivered the food? Like these are all details. That's why, like, surveys are a pain, right? Because like it takes time to track this, but you need to have a universal understanding with all of your team members. What is the information we're tracking? How do you track it? Why are we tracking this? And then evaluating it on a consistent sequence also. I'll tell you right now, evaluating it, looking back on it on a year basis, too long, right? Track your data and then start reviewing it at the very least quarterly, if not monthly, so that you can look at, the short term, kind of like what's happening. Are we doing this right? Are we tracking it right? Or do we really have a clear understanding of what we're tracking? Do we see any trends already happening within this month span, right? And then taking that and expanding out to a year look.
Okay.
So that's the whole thing of like mapping, right? Like mapping your organization, being able to track, being able to evaluate if you're tracking correctly, and then being able to evaluate how you're doing, and then mapping out where you want to go next.
Oh. Okay. So I want to, because sorry, I heard the bells from my laundry machine. I was like, what's that? So I hear all this, loving this. There's all this information. Do you have maybe like a guide or a simple way, or like maybe a way to remember all this? Like how I would measure my progress and success? I know we had some notes, and I think it was one of the questions you were asking: why, what, when, where.
Oh yeah. I definitely have like some charts I can pull together and send out. It's just we decided to have like more of a conversation, so I'm not going to pull those up. But yeah, no, absolutely. I think if you want to base it off of those questions that we always have, right? Yes. Why, what, how, when, where, right? Like that could be kind of the premise for your thinking through your organization's goals. And then from those goals, you then figure out, okay, what are the questions I need to ask to measure what we're trying to accomplish up there that we just plotted out, right? And then when you have those questions lined up of how we're going to measure that, then you start thinking through, all right, what are the data points that we want to go ahead and plot out and put down to start tracking?
Oh, I love this. So I want to do a quick pause because there was so much information, and this is the facilitator / an educator side of me comes up. For those who are like on the other side of the screen, I think this is the best time right now to do a quick jot in your notes, like things that stood out to you, because I feel like this is information, really important information, whether I was at, because I'm my own small business owner, and this information is very powerful for me. I consult groups, and I feel like this is important information for me, so I'm taking notes of that. But for you all who are doing these different projects, right? Like, what are 1 or 2 things you want to take away right now at this very moment, right? And we're gonna have multiple of these moments. We're gonna like, what are takeaways, right? So at the moment, for yourself, take a little bit and just write that quick thought. It's like something stood out to you. Okay. While we're doing that, I'm gonna give a little pause. I'm just gonna just really chat a little bit, right? I love this information. I love like we just went from all this, like this whole like realm, and then bringing it back and recognizing it's like ways to set ourselves apart, but in a way that it's also collaborative. I love the coalition building that Lena was talking about. So yeah, I'm just like, maybe I'm the one who's trying to catch up with all this information. That's what's going on. Moving on then, I guess, because we're going to have a national showcase in the coming months. And one of those is that we want to give space so that the students who are finishing up their projects or who are in progress with their projects, they can like do a pitch and present to gain resources. And resources could be people volunteering their time, additional funding from grantors, networking opportunities. I'm gonna say it, like I've seen projects sometimes where I'm just like, oh, that was painful. They could have, that was painful, right? Brings me back to my own childhood. And I guess the question is, when I'm looking for like support, or in this case, even like my time with nonprofit, what kind of metrics do funders, grantors, and philanthropic organizations look for when it comes to like, yeah, what kind of metrics, information you looking for to say, hey, this is something I will invest my time or energy into?
Well, I mean, we answered it, right? It's what Wen just wrote down. It's like they want to know why you decided to exist. They want to know what you're trying to accomplish, like what problem are you trying to solve for? They want to know like where the geography that you're trying to serve and why that area is why you focused in on. They want to know the timeline for like the data they're actually going to be demonstrating. And they want to know how this is all being accomplished. But if we were to look at an infographic per se, right, and we're looking at all these different pieces of information, it's a combination of the statistics behind like, okay, we're going to break down each and every one then, because that's a very broad question. Okay, let's go in. So
my apologies.
Yeah, no, I think at the end of the day, what each of us is trying to do is make a difference for people, right? It's for people, whatever area that you're trying to solve for. And so painting a picture of who it is that you're trying to make a difference for, and why it is that you feel this population is who you are zeroing in on, right? And so that information can be both the people that you actually touch, and then more demographical information. So that's like the census, right? So this area has this percentage population, and based on these studies has faced this challenge, and this challenge. Those are all very valid resources to reference in your narrative, right? And so now you've given a little bit of background on the challenge, why you exist. And then there's what you're hoping to do based on that information that you have. And so now you've identified the challenge. What is going to be your charge? Pull it out. We are going to do X, Y, and Z. We are going to door knock and make sure that we are providing information on the next ballot that's coming out in November. We are going to distribute food to this block because we know that there is a concentration of homeless people that live here, blah, 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 right? And then the next level is, okay, how? All right, let's go even deeper with how. So you're going to door knock. All right, how many doors do you think you feasibly can knock on? How many people on your team are going to be doing this work? How many hours are going to be dedicated to door knocking? How much time are you spending per door knock and talking to people, right? And how do you measure the result? Like this many people checked that they are going to vote and that they feel more informed based on the discussion that we had. Right, and then where? Okay, we're gonna focus in, okay, we mentioned that before, but we're gonna focus in on this neighborhood. But here's the thing, maybe you start your work and you realize, oh, we actually hit a larger area than we have anticipated, like originally hypothesized, right? So, but you're not able to track that unless you actually put down, like, we're going to track where we're going and the steps that we've taken, right? And then again, when, like, the time frame for which the information is being tracked. So those are really nuts and bolts, but I hope that gives you an idea of how the information can be tracked and then how it fits into your narrative.
Wow. I love this because I'm like thinking, okay, is this a simple framework, right? Asking the questions with the context of like, how do we tell our story? How do we get their metrics? Is there a certain way that funders looking for these metrics, or what's more important is to get our story in first, the metrics piece?
I think, so it's funny that we're talking about this because for my company's retreat, I'm chairing it and we're doing a whole entire presentation around building your case for support, right? And so what you're essentially asking me for, Anthony, is your case for support. There's metrics that are a piece of information that you're going to place into your case, right? And so what funders actually want are not just your numbers. They don't want your number soup. They want to understand the context and why these numbers matter. And so your case for support is all these things, right? It's all these why, what, how, when, where. And then you enter in those numbers and those information where the questions that your answer exists. And so, like, we can have a whole nother conversation around case for support. So, but essentially a case for support is your story for why people should fund you, right? So again, it goes, and like, there are a couple of other elements to it, but it's why you exist, like the history and context. It is the problem for which you're trying to solve and why you know this problem exists. It is your plan, your game plan for solving that problem, how you're going to accomplish it. And then there's the actual ask, there's a call to action, right? Which is, look, if we're going to do this work, we've done this work for a year now. We know it costs this much. We need to raise this much. And we need you to think about giving us this much. And this is why your gift makes a difference, right? And so you can see that whole entire narrative within a case for support, but you don't have that information to plug in if you're not tracking the work that you're doing.
So this is exciting because I was thinking that one of the projects they do this, not one project, when we did the showcase last year, it was very general. It was really kind of nice to just showcase it. But if we were to give space for them to recruit or bring in support, whether it's funding or volunteer, having the data says we are looking for this many volunteers to be with us, it actually gives, I feel like that would give me better insight, like, oh, this is how much they need to be true and becomes more achievable. Because if I didn't know that number, I'd just be like, oh, do I feel like I could commit my time to this project?
Setting expectations is a huge part of the case for support and talking to funders, helping them understand how their time, their resources can be optimally used within your organization, right? And so again, this goes into some like doing your due diligence, right? If I were to go up to you, Anthony, and I were to ask you, hey, can you help me with fishing? You'd be like, I know nothing about fishing, right? Because I didn't do my research. But if I came to you and said, hey, I have this group of people who could really work on their emotional intelligence and their leadership skills in contact with emotional intelligence, you'd be like, yeah, let's go. What do you need? And I would tell you, we need an hour, so and so and so forth. The same goes with asking funders for their donation, right? And this is where like my fundraising hat comes in, like hardcore. You don't get unless you ask, and you want to ask for the right amount. And so I am encouraging all of you, if you're going to go to a funder, do some research around, oh, like, has this funder given any gifts before? Do they normally give gifts? What may I ask them for? Look, be ambitious, right? If you need $1,000, ask for $1,000. If you think like, this is not like out of the question. We're not talking about like $1 million or 500,000. We're talking like, do we ask for like 500? Do we ask for 1,000? Do we ask for maybe 5,000? Be ambitious. You know what I mean? Have it align with your vision. Or, you know what? We're looking for everyone to give $50 today. Can you make a $50 donation? We understand everyone has different circumstances, and we're just looking to, have everyone come together and support this vision, right? And so be specific about what you're asking for.
Thank you again, Anne, for so much. That was, I love that, because I didn't realize that was two separate things. I was thinking it was the same thing about from metrics, but also like call for support, case for support. But they're also
metrics is a type of information. Case for support is an actual tool for fundraising.
Oh, and I'm guessing we use the metrics for the case of support is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So more important reason why metrics or knowing what we're measuring is so important. If our guests or if our audience members are curious and they reach out to you, can they reach out to you?
Oh gosh, of course. Anytime.
Okay.
You're more than welcome to send out my email address. Of course I have a LinkedIn, but I think direct email is probably the most effective.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. One last question, then we're gonna just like give them a break so they do their group consulting, and then you can spend time with your kids at the kid's birthday party. What are words of wisdoms, encouragement that you like to share with our audience member?
Oh man, I already did on the top part. Sorry, I flipped it. But
No, I mean that could be, this is the cool part because we have the original part and we have all this information, right? Now it's just like, what else has emerged since then?
I think it comes down to this for me, and this is like definitely obviously my perspective, but have grace for yourself, have grace for your work, have grace for kind of like where you want to go and how you get there. And what I mean by that is I think a lot of times, especially at a younger age, we put so much pressure on ourselves to whatever this word succeed means, be successful, right? There's now pushing 40. I mean, that's not old by any means, but I mean, pushing 40 and lived a little bit longer. I just realized look at the big picture, not only in like what you're trying to do with your organization, but what you're trying to do in life, and just like enjoy, do what you feel really matters to you, and don't let the external factors like give you crushing like anxiety around like who you are and what you need to be. Because I think at this age, your instincts are really valuable, and who you are as an individual and your authentic self, it really does matter. It matters and it makes a difference. And so don't try to keep up with the Joneses, man. Just like be your authentic self, and you'd be amazed of how far that can take you. Because I'll tell you right now, when I joined my firm, it was all white people. It was all white people. Right. And I came in and I thought I had to talk a certain way, I had to dress a certain way, I had to act a certain way. And I didn't see myself really thriving and succeeding until I was like, I am on the wind from San Jose, and there's a little hood in me, and I'm going to talk a little differently, and I'm going to be my real self. And I tell you, the moment I broke out of that shell, I did such better work. I felt so much better about myself, and everyone around me actually embraced me much more, and they felt much more comfortable around me. And so that's not only for professional, it's for life in general. It's like once you shed away what you think other people are expecting of you, you'd be amazed at what you're able to accomplish and able to really step into.
Oh, wow. Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here with us. We're at that time, we're going to like start like wrapping it up here. For our audience members, do me a favor, say thank you, right? Write your thank yous. If there are takeaways you want to share, write some takeaways. I'm all about building community, even if it's just like online like this. And when you build community is like, like sharing your takeaways, even your gratitude. CLA was created for a reason, and the reason was to empower high school and college youth to really make impact, civic and community impact. right? And these workshops are from the generosities of people's time, professionals who have done such big things, and they're just also share the same vision of like empowering the next generation of leaders. So if you can do me a favor, just write a quick thank you in the message, or you can message on directly if you want to do that way. Thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate your time as always. Always appreciate the friendship, you spending time with us. I don't know what else to say, but on behalf of Civic Leadership Academy, you are amazing. Thank you. And your information was not just insightful, but also inspirational. So thank you.
No problem. I'm going to drop my email into the chat just so that it's accessible immediately. And then let me just drop a little information about CCS fundraising. I'm sure you already sent it out, but this is the firm that I work for. And what's funny is I entered CCS without even knowing what they do, who they are, like why they existed. And it was by accident. But I think the people in this space, be open to different career tracks, right? Like this might be something that you're interested in doing in the future. And so shameless plug for CCS fundraising, because I always want to see my same people at CCS. I would love to see more of y'all join.
I was going to ask you about that and said, are you also looking for people to hire on to join your?
Oh, we're always hiring, and we are a worldwide firm. So we have offices here in the Bay Area, San Francisco, Seattle, LA, Denver, we have Boston, Atlanta, New York City. So we're all over the country. If you want to learn more, please reach out. And I'm happy to give you the download, and we'll see, if this is a career track you want to explore, we welcome your application.
Oh, I love this. Went from mentorship, how to tell your story, presenting, community impact, and now job opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. All right. So you all make sure you get all that information, right? Especially if you're like, you know what? I want a job that's impactful, that's benefiting the community. Here you go. Mm-hmm. All right. With that said, I want to make sure I honor your time. Thank you so much for being with us, and it's amazing again.
Always an honor and a pleasure, Anthony.
Okay.